In this part two of ISV Talks with David Musgrave from Winthrop Development Consultants, David talks about his journey from Microsoft and how GP Power Tools got its start. David worked at Microsoft for 14 years, and as a support escalation engineer, he was able to develop the support debugging tool. With David's knowledge of GP and based on continuous feedback from partners and users in the community, David continues to add new features and requests. GP Power Tools is a suite of tools that help administer, support, and develop on the Microsoft Dynamics GP platform. Please enjoy the second part of this conversation. Winthrop Development Consultants, how did the company get started, and tell us a little bit about your journey?
So that goes way back. So it was probably about 93 that I was working with my brother-in-law at a company that was called SQL Technology. We were working on help desk systems. He had a bit of a background in accounting, and a friend of mine was working with the Macintosh version of a product called Great Plains at the time, and he wasn't going to work with the PC side. So he said, well, why don't you do the PC side? And we did have a look at version 1 Dynamics running on the PC, decided it was a little bit primitive at that stage. I mean, it was a version 1 product, and we looked at it. It was cool, but my brother-in-law didn't want to get involved yet. So in 1994, Dynamics version 2 came out, and this time we said, okay, let's get involved. In fact, the other guy who was working on the Macintosh stuff ended up leaving the business, and we became the first West Australian partner for Great Plains.
Awesome.
So, and that was under the brand name of SQL Technology. I wrote name printers, which I got an award for. I then ended up leaving SQL Technology and creating Winthrop Dexterity Consultants. And I was there for about 2 years, and I created advanced security and field level security at that time. And I also worked on contract with Great Plains to get GP ready for the Australian GST, which included adding taxes to POP and creating the reporting tool, the business activity statement. So after those 2 years, I ended up getting headhunted by Microsoft and spent 14 years working with them in Asia Pacific development, and then professional services, and finally in support, where I worked as an escalation engineer for the Asia Pacific support team. In 2014, they ended up shutting down the Australian support, and I restarted Winthrop instead of Winthrop Dexterity Consultants. I got fed up of telling people, trying to explain what dexterity was to non-GP people. So I created Winthrop Development Consultants. So now they just think I build houses. But when I left, when I was at Microsoft, I had some pet projects which I was able to get the rights to. So primarily support debugging tool, which became rebranded as GP Power Tools, and menus for Visual Studio Tools, which I rebranded as Visual Studio Integration Toolkit, because it does more than just menus. And that one is still available for free. And having GP Power Tools, it meant that the support debugging tool becoming GP Power Tools, it meant that I came down from leaving Microsoft running, and was able to straight away have something to sell and have a business that could keep me fed.
Yeah, good. GP Power Tools was kind of the start of your business, but prior to that, it was the support debugging tool. What was it created for originally?
So the history of that, it was actually originally branded as the MBS, being Microsoft Business Solutions, which later that branding got dropped, but the MBS support debugging tool. And it was created after we had a support case that was running for 12 months without a resolution, which the customer was not happy, I can tell you that. And we could see what the problem was. There was an issue. We could see it in the table data, but no one could replicate it. The user couldn't, the partner couldn't, the Australian support team couldn't, the US support team couldn't, even the development team in the US had no idea what was happening. So I combined a few different ideas. The idea of programmatically controlling logging, and then also using triggers to look at the data after a table save event. And what that meant is we were able to capture logs right up to the point where the data was wrong and identify the exact script that changed the data. And then looking at that script, we were able to, with it 4 days after we installed this, the first version of the tool, we had the logs, identified the script, found the line of code that was causing the problem, and the development team had us a fix by the end of the week. So after 12 months of getting nowhere, this thing solved it in 4 days. So
wow. That's amazing. Yeah, from 12 months to 4 days, solved case. That's amazing.
yeah, so that's it. Still has that functionality within GP Power Tools. It is an extremely good diagnostic tool for supporting GP, and that is separate to all of the cool things it can do beyond that.
Mm-hmm. So based on your experience, is there any perspective you have to share about the GP marketplace with customers trying to improve their operational efficiency and optimize their GP investment?
The way that I've always worked, and I mean, I love this GP community. It gets into your blood, and I created the support debugging tool as a free tool to assist the support team, and later on it then became released to partners and customers, and was there just to try and help them. I started adding extra features, so looking at making sure GP would run smoothly, the color coding, and helping with security, just making sure that it was a lot easier to use GP. That whole thing about, I wrote the tool based on gaps I saw in the community, and feedback I had from the community to help make their lives better. I still have that same aim. Even though the support debugging tool was free, GP Power Tools is not free, but that's because I don't get a salary from Microsoft anymore. And, I do need to be able to put food on the table. So that's now my income. So I'm continuously getting feedback from customers, and anything that's a good idea, I will look to put it on the list. And, if I'm in the middle of a development cycle, it will quite often just happen to, get placed straight into the new build. So I had a request for having working hours for the automatic log off functionality with weekends and business hours, and that's now in build 29. Yeah, I put that in the day after somebody asked for it.
Like, when someone's asking for it, or you're trying to solve a situation, then you realize, hey, somebody else could probably use this too. Then it gets added, right?
Yeah, I mean, basically, if one person needs it, then I can add it as an option. If you don't need it, you don't need to use it, but it's there if you want it.
So what other ways are you helping customers optimize GP?
Most of the customers are using some sort of customizations to enhance the core GP product and make it more tailored to their own needs. So obviously the Visual Studio Integration Toolkit is going to allow people using Visual Studio tools to get access to functionality that they couldn't normally. So they've got all the abilities to call the dexterity functions that they don't have, and adding menus and area pages. Mm-hmm. But also GP Power Tools has the Developer Tools module, which is a very, very powerful development tool which does not require any external tools. It's built into GP. All the scripts and settings are stored in SQL. You get the ability to write dexterity triggers and scripts. You get SQL scripting. You got .NET scripting with C# or VB.NET. It basically will allow you to do anything that VBA could do and lots more. It has access to underlying scripts and the table buffers, which VB doesn't have access to. So we can reuse GP business logic by making calls. Again, VBA can't do that. So if you want to use it and you don't quite have the skills internally, I actually offer partners and customers the ability to purchase prepaid time. They can buy blocks of time, and I use that for consulting and mentoring to help them develop custom code. I much prefer to mentor them through the process so that they learn to do it themselves rather than just doing it for them. Then again, I can pass work on to a colleague if you just need somebody to write programming for you. So,
Why
but
not
also
learn how to use the tool, the developer tools, even developers, right? They can use it to make their process even more efficient.
if you are a developer, there is stuff in GP Power Tools which will help you write your code and understand what GP is doing. It's got the much better logging capabilities and even prototyping of scripts that you can use. So, but the other thing is that I have been writing lots and lots of different samples. So, when people have been coming to me and saying, "Oh, we want to use GP Power Tools to perform X function," I've normally been working with them, and I'll say to them, "Okay, if I'll subsidize this for you if you let me publish the end result." So, they pay for less time, and then the community benefits from that. They get what they need, but then the community benefits. And the other thing is that once it becomes something that I'm working on independently of them, I can, I'll be improving new versions of it. So you definitely want to make sure that you go to the GP Power Tools portal. That's wintropdc.com/GPPT. There is a samples page there, and any of those samples can be downloaded. So there's, some great ones there for like customer and vendor tracking. Soon to be posted about, I've got item change tracking, the SQL lookups, and there's great stuff there. The other thing, once they're imported, you can fine tune them to whatever you want there. You just go and edit the code. No external tools needed.
Yeah, that's fantastic. So if you can't find something that takes care of a particular need, just create it, right?
Absolutely.
So what one trend have you seen, I guess, in the space that really are driving partners and customers to come talk to you?
Okay, I'm going to be honest here. I can't bring it down to one. There's a few things that partners and customers have been looking at. So probably one of the big ones that's been driving things recently is replacing VBA. The fact that VBA is no longer supported and that it doesn't work in a lot of on Windows Server 2019 means that people are looking for alternatives. GP Power Tools development module is the easiest way to replace the VBA. You can use the modified windows that you already had. So GP Power Tools is able to work with the modified windows, and it has a lot of helper functions to allow you to work across dictionaries and read data out of the duos. That's a technical thing for anybody who understands that one. So yeah, that's been probably one of the biggest ones. Next, I would say user license management. So if you buy GP Power Tools and you can control how your licenses are used and monitor how your licenses are used and use tools such as user activity tracking, login limits, and automatic logout, you can avoid having to buy additional licenses. So I can tell you that a GP Power Tool subscription is way cheaper than another license.
Right? Yeah, I have had partners tell me that they recommend the tools instead of buying a whole new GP license because they can just manage their licenses a little better, exiting people gracefully if they go home for the day and leave their session running. Things like that can really help maximize their user licenses.
Yeah, and Build 29 has a number of new features for automatic logout, so you've got a lot more flexibility in the next build. So the other thing is that we're because of the modern life cycle and everybody being asked to stay on the latest versions. I think the third thing that I've been seeing a lot of is people doing upgrades and server migrations. So when they're doing that, the database tools, particularly the database validation tool within GP Power Tools, makes sure that all the data is in the correct format, all the users are created correctly. It really helps ensure smooth upgrades. It can easily recreate all your logins after moving to a new server, and that's with encryption. The standard method that Microsoft has, it doesn't do it anywhere near as smoothly or quickly. So. And then
so it sounds like, getting upgraded, replacing VBA code, which a lot of clients don't even realize they have, and being able to maximize their GP licensing.
I actually have a number of customers who are using GP Power Tools to replace all their VBA, Dexterity, and Visual Studio code. So they're moving all of their custom code into GP Power Tools just because it's easier to maintain. There's no extra steps required for upgrading. So it's just a much easier way to work. So I suppose the last thing that I'm thinking about that people have come to me recently is something actually that came into, just having a look at the date, it came into play 8 days ago, which was the NACHO and the NACHA organization that is involved with ACH transactions has basically put a requirement that bank details need to be obscured when the data is at rest. And GP Power Tools allows you to very quickly develop code. So I have released for free a bit of custom code that meets that requirement, and anybody with GP Power Tools can just download it and install it, activate the code, and they'll be meeting the requirement to obscure their bank details. I also recently released something for Australian customers to be able to validate the Australian business numbers, that's the tax number, and GST registration for their vendors. So there's a story that I had heard that an Australian customer got caught out because a particular vendor changed their GST registration status and didn't tell them, and now the tax office is coming at them for a large sum of money. So it's important to be aware of something. So I wrote a bit of code to look at that for you.
Nice. So definitely taking care of your Australian customers with their complaints, but not to, wow, it's probably a bigger deal than people realize, if you're using EFT functionality in GP and that's a pretty
the concept, even though this was specifically for Australian customers, the same concept, if you've got tax registration that you need to validate, the same concept, the code could be easily changed to work for another country's tax system. So particularly ones that are running GST and you need to check their registration status.
Yeah, like Canada probably is another good candidate for that.
Yep, and maybe even the UK with the VAT, or and Europe. So
probably a lot of locations that have tax needs like that. So well, good. Well, thank you, David. Is there any last thoughts you'd like to share with us?
I am really looking forward to catching up with everybody at the Summit Conference. I've definitely missed not being there. So, I know that the last two conferences, or 2 years worth of conferences, were, barely happened for understandable reasons. But this year, the numbers are looking good, and we get a bit of normalcy back into our world.
Right.
Even though I tell you what, the flights are really expensive. Oh my gosh.
Well, thank you, David, for joining us today on our episode of ISV Talks to share a little bit more about what you've been up to with GP Power Tools, and glad to hear that you're going to make the trek to Orlando in October. So here's David's contact information if you want to reach out to him, his Twitter handle as well. And he mentioned a couple times about his blog. I really recommend you subscribe to that because you can get all the latest and greatest news and fun facts too. Sometimes he throws in some fun things. So thank you, David, for joining today.
My pleasure. Thank you for giving me the opportunity.
All right. Talk to you later. Thank you so much. Bye-bye.